Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Wings Podcast. This is your host, Milind Agnihotri. On today's show, we will meet Indranil Chitale, a fourth generation partner at the 8 decades old Chitale Group. Indranil joined the family business in 2011 and was systematically groomed through multiple organization roles. He led a project to build a 2 lakh square feet factory that started the group's foray into mithai and namkeen packaging and distribution. This new factory helped Chitale Group in tripling its business volumes. Indranil currently heads the products business involving brands like Chitale Bandhu, Chitale M Square, and Binge Bar that retail through 60 plus Chitale Bandhu stores and more than 2.5 lakh retailers and supermarkets across India and global markets. Startups, angel investing, and industry level policy making are his other priorities. Formally trained in tabla, keyboard, and drums, Indranil's music playlist is a heady mix of Indian classical music as well as Western pop and rock. Welcome, Indranil, to this episode of Wings Podcast.
Thank you very much, Min. Pleasure to be here.
So, how does it feel to come on the Wings Podcast? Have you listened to any of the previous episodes?
Yes. I did have a chance to listen to a couple of the episodes in your previous season, and I'm quite excited because we've been talking for some time. So, looking forward to talking more about it today formally.
Absolutely. So, Indian economy, whatever little my own experience goes over the last 3-4 decades that I have been working on is, I think family business has been in India for a long time, and it's probably only in the 50s or 60s probably when professionally run companies started finding its feet in India. I mean, the British tobacco company BAT, I think, right? They came in, and that's how ITC happened.
ITC came into picture.
And Unilever came through, and so many other pharma companies essentially came in.
That's true.
I mean, of course, they created a different scale and nature of doing business in India, but family business has survived over the years and decades. And I would like to believe that probably as we speak, they are probably doing better job in running businesses where they're able to hold both the traditional Indian way of looking at all the life cycle of business, unlike the West. So I don't know. Let's jump into the conversation to hear from you about how do you hold the notion of family business in India in general, and then how has Chitale Group evolved over the last 8 decades? Of course, much of it is known to many people, but love to hear it from you.
Sure. So, as we were just discussing before, that my understanding about family businesses too has evolved over a period of time since I have started working, before I started working, and now that I look forward to seeing how do we succeed as a family business in the next generation. And one thing that I have come to realize is that the Western idea of shrewd capitalism does not really work in a country like ours, where the disparity is too high, and the social structure is where a titular face is necessary for organizations to be perceived to be successful. So while of course we have the great multinationals who made their way during and just post independence, there is still a majority of the chunk of businesses being run by families or being controlled by families, where probably the operations are now professionalized. And they have been successful in doing so is because they have been able to preserve the social value of businesses in the country as well. So whenever that social angle is something that is taken care of, where all your stakeholders in those business, so be it your suppliers, be it your employees, be it your distributors, be it your customers, be it the periphery around it, where the families of the people involved in this ecosystem are also taken care of, that in a whole can be summarized as a way a family business should be. And where there is again that patriarchal point of view of one family controlling how those decisions are made, but where the impact or the ramifications of it are felt positively or negatively based on the decisions across the spectrum or this ecosystem that is there. And when that is done successfully, those businesses end up becoming multi-generational, and when that social value is preserved and reinvented every generation, that is when they thrive and actually become sustainable to be passed on to the next generation.
So when you say social value preservation, what are the 2 or 3 things that you are alluding to here?
So my great grandfather started this business. This was in the year 1939, and we started operating this business in a very small village called Bilodi, where the only reason he established the business there was the proximity of the river Krishna, where that was water supply all over the year, and second, the availability of British rail at that time, where we could send our product from that market to the main market. So while doing that, eventually as of today, there are more than 70,000 farmers who work with us.
Okay.
These farmers own the cattle that supplies the milk into our factory.
Mm-hmm.
So we go beyond the point of just buying milk from the farmers. We go to a point where we will be giving them good medical support for their animals, call center where the health updates for the animals are given to them, the genetics where the next generation of these animals are born with lesser diseases, to a point where now we can actually even determine and ensure that 90% of the time it's always a female animal that is born. So this ensures that the farmer interest in this ecosystem remains, and that way they can have been having 1 animal, 5 animal, 20 animals, sometimes 100 animals also, based on the kind of farm and the capability they have. But their interests are all around safeguarded by the organization, which is why the quality of milk coming into our plant is good, and that is why all milk products that we make and eventually sell across the world are good, and which is why the customer value is also retained. So these both spectrums are something that we balance, and that is why the commerce is something that gets taken care of.
So as a young child growing up in this large family, I would like to believe, as an 8 or 10-year-old kid, did you dream of joining this business and be a part of this business, or were there some other thoughts in your mind at that age?
Well, so what I would say is that we were given a choice that if you want to do something else, you're free to do that. But the way the exposure towards the business happened as a very young kid, say 5 year, 10 year, where my grandfather or his brothers or my uncles, all of them made it a point to take us to wherever they were going. So be it just seeing our milk distributors, or going to a store and just interacting with customers, or going to the factory when some new machine had come or some puja is to be made, or just interacting or being around where our opinion was considered.
Any experience that comes to your mind where 8 or 10 or 15-year-old Indranil was held by his uncle or father and taken to some place, something which has still stayed with you?
So one instance that, so I don't remember it because I was too young, but what I got to know from my parents or my grandparents back then was that we were at our mithai factory, and we were just tasting the jalebi that was there. And the idea in the business was that whatever is being made, you should taste a bite out of it. Correct. Just to see what was done.
Correct.
And that is how I got as a 4-year-old a bite of the jalebi. And I did not like it, and I was frank enough to tell this to my grandfather that something is not right. So I could not probably pinpoint the attributes to it, but I did. So he was like, are you sure? And I said, yes, I am. So he tested, and there was something wrong with the way the sugar syrup was. It was tasting a little sour than expected. But then that opinion of being heard as a 4-year-old, and just being considered a valuable suggestion, was something that the people working there as well as the family ensured we could do. And that freedom was something that naturally inclined us towards being involved in the business, having some opinion, having some suggestions, and that gradually progressed into taking more responsibility.
But then when you finished your graduation and you chose to formally join the business in 2011, almost a decade ago, a little more than that, what did you feel that the process is going to be very easy for you, because you are born in the family, you are owner, and in that sense taking charge.
Correct.
So all you have to do is just get into your cabin and start working. Is that how it played out for you early days of your joining the business?
I think it was well established even when we were in college that is not how you're going to get to be the
Oh,
boss.
no cabin on the first day, huh?
So we didn't have a cabin at all.
Oh,
So,
okay.
And back then, even in my college days, in my summer breaks or internships, whatever it is, I have spent all the time in our factories. So be it our dairy, be it our fruit processing factory, be it our mithai and namkeen factories, smaller things like early days, that time internet connectivity was not great, so ordering spare parts, machineries, or just talking to other people was something that my father and my uncle took great efforts to expose me to at an early age. So as a college going kid, I have bunked college and gone with my uncle to meet some good software company or some good hardware company and just understand, because I was trained as an electronics engineer, just to see what they were talking. So very often I was probably not the best in terms of getting the grades, but I had the great exposure in college in terms of what were going to be the new computing things, because back then big data was the thing about to come.
Correct.
So we were doing that practically while it was being taught, and that just created a great interest as well as a great avenue to understand how technology was being applied. And that's why this was a systematic, I don't know how systematic it was thought by my uncles or my father, but they just put in the effort that let's expose, not hold back any cards, and see what they like. And that's how I got probably my first project, that let's try and install this. We are probably not going to be in town, so you can figure this out. And that proved successfully and that also ended up creating good relation with the management that was there, which was the outside people.
Correct.
So this ice breaking happened gradually, whether it was extremely systematic or whether it was completely unsystematic, it worked out well. And there was less friction in terms of establishing myself at the workplace.
Any highlights that come to your mind where you kind of felt like patting your own back in your grooming days into the business, or any experiences where you felt that you have let yourself down? Love to hear both the flavors in your kind of grooming up days in the Chitade group.
Correct. No, so there were multiple of those.
Let's pick one of those.
But
one in both the buckets.
so I think one of the fact which I have realized late, especially in terms of where my interest lied, was that I was never interested in the store business.
Mm-hmm.
So while the family took that initiative that you should spend some time in the stores, try and understand this, I took great efforts to ensure that I did not want to do this, and I systematically ensured that we professionalize that business. So my pace of professionalizing was much faster than the family could digest at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And my debate was simple, that if you don't see a McDonald's owner going to the store and running that store, and that's why they are at 5,000 stores maybe across the world, and we are at that time we were 20 probably. So we need to do that. So obviously I held on to my point, but in process what I realized was that the fabric of the business was something that I did not really understand as a young person. That's something that I have started realizing a little later, was where that professionalizing challenged. So as I realized and as I progressed, I got support as well as some criticism inside the family on why do you want to hard press this as an activity. We passed through, we established that successfully, but while doing that I realized that we also need to look at the social aspects of all of this. So, and the fabric that we say, it's not a tangible thing, and as an engineer it's very difficult to understand at a young age. So that I wish I had more understanding as a young engineer, which now I do. And I think the other area where I think I quite happy about where I could establish myself was on the idea that we were quite heavily dependent on labor forces back then, because the automation in traditional businesses was not existent like it is today. So that way unions, strikes, dealing with people was always a problem. And we had one of our biggest strikes in 75 years in 2015-16.
Okay.
And that time I was not a director in that particular company, but my father and my uncle were. So that way they were the ones doing the job of facing the whole activity of negotiations back and forth, etc. But I got a great idea to mirror them at that time, and while doing that, parallelly we built an entire ecosystem which could not just mirror what was about to undergo strike, but we actually bettered what they were doing. And in process we established the fact that the labor utilization or dependency on skill is a unnecessary importance that we had given at that time, that could be bypassed anytime. And that just changed the way we look at managing labor and the way labor look at us, that we now don't have any external unions. Our workforce understands that dealing directly with the family is always a better thing, rather than involving third party politicians who are coming with vested interests. And that way the organization is bigger than the workforce or the family's ambitions, and we need to preserve the organization. So that's something that we could establish, and that also helped me establish myself in the vast ecosystem that we were at that time. And that's something that I'm genuinely happy of, because past that we do labor negotiation meetings or agreements which are like 3-year terms in one meeting, which probably used to take 3 months.
So over the last 10-12 years,
Yeah.
I would like to believe that you would have had to prove yourself at every step, and probably having done that and now setting up the large factory that really got your business into namkeen and sweet packaging and distribution. Uh, in your current role that you are doing as a products head, in terms of managing brands, what has it that you've been able to achieve which was completely new in the group, which was never done before?
So one thing that we achieved on a soft or a intangible value would be asserting to ourselves that we are a brand.
Oh, that
Because-
realization wasn't there
Because
much?
till that point we were heavily involved in operating the business, so we never looked beyond our limited horizons at that time.
So produce,
And assert-
distribute and sell.
distribute and sell, and not think of it as a brand.
Okay.
But we were a brand. Customers accepted us as a brand much before we accepted ourselves.
No,
as
I
a
have
brand.
grown up eating just about every Chitare product right from my childhood, since last 45-50 years now.
But probably that's the humility that the family brought into the picture.
Okay.
But I think they underestimated the brand value that
Okay.
they had built over 3 generations.
Okay.
That we could leverage, and that is why we moved from being a Pune player to where we now sell across the world,
Okay.
and in multiple states in the country. And while doing that, we have been able to pivot our model of business from being retailers to being manufacturers and distributors.
Okay.
So now our core job is simply about manufacturing, building new products, doing R&D, and distributing it in channels where it could either be stores, it could be express stores, it could be digital businesses where it's e-commerce on online, or it could be kirana stores across the country, or it could be modern trade businesses where the likes of D-marts and big bazaars and all of these big ticket retail avenues, or exports. So now we are channel agnostic and we can sell anywhere. So that's what we could achieve over the last decade.
So multiple products manufactured at multiple locations, distributed and sold through multiple channels,
Correct.
through multiple geographies.
Yeah.
So it's in many ways just to simplify it, it's a many to many model then,
It is.
and that's how it is set up now
Correct.
to grow to scale.
Correct.
Now, in all this, that has been done, and I would like to believe that this must be taking at least 60-70 hours of a week for you, at least, of work, maybe more, if not more.
Correct.
How and when did this interest in startups got developed for you, and why is it so close to you?
So the idea was that when I came into this role of leading a division of the group, the thought of continuity also came into picture.
Mm-hmm.
Because till one moment I was somebody who was a contender for that spot. Now I had got into that spot. Now I had to see what happens after this happens. And I remember once that I heard Nitin Gadkari say just around that same time that BJP had just came into power at that time in the center after a long gap, and he was criticizing his ministers that we might be in power, but we are not used to being in power. So being in the opposition requires a different mindset. Being a challenger requires a different mindset. But when you are actually handling as a head of certain division, you require a different mindset. And that is when I started thinking that how do we build continuity into this. So today, and the disruption that was happening in Europe or US at that time, especially with vegans growing in vast number, allergens coming up as a big issue, India facing its own challenges, especially on the lifestyle front, where we have the largest number of hypertension patients in the world,
And diabetes patients.
and 50% of Indians poised to be diabetic by the end of this decade.
Correct.
So what we have sold so far, or what got us this way, was not probably going to take us ahead, and we had to create new avenues where we could sell our product or get new technology or just be imbibed into this culture where this gig economy was something we had to understand, because as traditional organizations we did not have the speed of building products that fast and scaling that fast. And that's where we found a good startup that was at that time, they were trying to make healthier foods.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually we realized that the model was not scalable, but we figured that this is something that we can build scale into, where our idea of scaling businesses and their idea of innovating products was something that we had to marry. And that worked out well, where we created a new division which is M Square, where it stands for mindful and mouthful. And we'll soon be launching our healthy breakfast range, where that's one of the big challenges we face. We have our range of sugar-free products, diabetic-friendly products, allergen-friendly products, vegan products, any of the newer trends that we'll soon be seeing in the way economy comes up. And that love for getting that startup culture into the organization and ability to produce was something that worked well in the group.
So it's not necessarily creating and investing into external startups, but within the entire group ecosystem itself, nurturing multiple startups in that sense.
And what we could do because of it is that from a point where we were at about, we could launch about 3 to 4 products a year. We can now do up to 4 products a month.
I have spent my initial career after my engineering in Wipro.
Correct.
And of course that was many years back, but then Mr. Premji used to always talk about this idea called string of pearls strategy, where the entire business group is actually a string of multiple pearls of small businesses, where it's one large monolith.
Correct.
To be seen externally, but within the group itself there are small startups which are kind of pulsating and vibrating at that speed. So kind of bringing in the relevance in today's times as one sees it.
Very true.
But then there is this work of, as a businessman, of course I have to run my business, but then I have to also create an environment which is viable and vibrant for me, not for today and tomorrow.
Correct.
This whole make in India, made in India, and this whole new environment of doing business in India, which is being talked about so much in the last 8-10 years or so. How do you see yourself either deriving value from it or adding value to that ecosystem that is still emerging? Would love to know the work that you are doing in the area of research and policies in that space, and what attracted you there? What was the real motivator there?
So I think this the string of pearls is exactly the idea that I had in my mind, that we need to assemble micro businesses which are relevant to relevant sectors and appeal to them as a whole, but while doing that use the Chitale umbrella as a funnel, and bring in the values that Chitale brand name has been known for and has stood the test of time. Because a person who wants to eat healthy is probably never going to come to a mithai store, and a person who's coming to a mithai store might never want to consider that it is unhealthy. So that is the kind of disparity we were looking at, and if we were to put everything under the same window, that was going to be a big misfire. So that is why this omni-channel presence that we are talking about, where digital businesses drive their own, you can target them with specified targeted ads. You can reach them out in a very different manner compared to physical infrastructure which Chitale Bandhu was known for. That's what we tried to build, and that's reasonably successful. But along with that, the front end of reaching to customers also needed a rework, where our investments into a cricket business was useful because we could expose ourselves to what health and nutrition was talking about, and directly getting access to athletes because of it, or getting data on HR through HR metrics, which also improved our productivity, but also on so many other fronts where we knew where we could tap, because an industrial worker working as a HR and their meals itself is going to be a very different priority and challenge than what a very a software engineer working in an IT company will be. So how do we pinpoint all of this is where this ecosystem reject work well for us. And while doing that, I see. So I'm a firm believer that the growth story or the Make in India is going to be a great exercise in rebuilding the country's economy and perspective towards making money. But while doing that, I also see certain amounts of challenge because we have systematically over the last 70 years built a bureaucratic ecosystem which is not friendly for manufacturing. Why
But
software and
we talk so much about ease of doing business, and India ranks. I don't know. At least the data that comes across seems promising.
is improving. But why India's software exports have been so high is because they are new industries which are less bureaucratic.
Yes.
And that is what needs to transcend into the manufacturing industry, because we need to understand that 40% of India's population is still doing primary jobs.
Yes.
So for them to shift into secondary jobs itself is the big challenge, and that is where manufacturing or hard labor is going to be the activity to do, because their skill development has never happened, and unfortunately they have not had a chance to be exposed to that kind of skill set. So unless we create jobs in manufacturing, their next generation are the ones who are going to come into high tech jobs in the time to come. They'll probably be shorter spans than existing generations. So which is why a lot of work on the policy is necessary, because till then we are not going to be able to create ecosystems which are friendly for manufacturing. And there is another set of challenge where I see that very recently good software companies who have gone into manufacturing, and we have been hearing about them, their scooters blowing up. So that's the problem. So their skill set was building great software. Their skill set was not about building great manufactured products, and that requires a different skill which I am sure they will engineer into time to come. But that misfit is what we have to overcome, and that can only happen when policy is favoring this. Otherwise, this kind of disruptive activities do more damage than actually adding to the economy, and that's probably, I hope, doesn't happen with the this particular startup, like we've been witnessing with the current IPOs that are happening.
Yes.
So we need to be prudent on understanding this and create jobs which are relevant to people who what supply we have available.
It is said that running business has a certain inherent rhythm to it, and a pace.
Yeah.
I wonder if the tabla player in you is kind of helping in the rhythm and pace that you are trying to bring into the business. Let's hear what's happening in that intersection of.
So I would say rather that rather than tabla, that is where my learning of drums.
Or let's say drums.
Drums help me.
Okay.
So I have been formally trained in tabla. I know how to play it well. But drumming was something that I really found interesting after seeing a friend play drums. And the thing is, with drums, you have so many variables to play.
So yeah, go ahead.
So it's like you have the snare, you have the bass drum, you have the toms, you have the the cymbals, you have the hi hats. So your two hands and 2 feet are doing so many things at the same time, and if they don't work in the right rhythm and in coordination, it does not sound good. And that for me was a very good challenge to understand, because that's how mostly running businesses are. Because on one hand the hi hat has to keep playing the rhythm, but you have to have that bass drum that's doing that job of being a very strong, robust foundation. And while doing that, your toms have to play. They have to be that systematic novelty value, and you have to play the snare in that repeated fashion. So that's like running a business, and for me that connected very well, which is where I think I just got into that idea of learning drums and playing drums very well, because it just helps me mentally prepare myself towards being aware on running so many facets of a business. Not to say I'm good at it.
Have you performed at any concert?
I have once, as part of my teachers, annual event.
Yes.
I have a long way to go in terms of performing at a concert, to be very honest, but it's just a great challenge that I take over.
But I would like to believe, given the way you have shaped yourself over the last decade or so in business, if you were to put your mind to it, I wouldn't be surprised if we find you in some of the future episodes of NH7.
Well, I think that's a great goal to have. And also something that I have genuinely been enjoying with my kids. So I have
Okay.
2 boys. 3 and 1.
Okay.
And that way we have a music room because I have learned so many instruments that.
And you play the keyboard too?
I play the keyboard too. My father also is very much inclined to to music.
Yes.
So is my sister, so is my wife. My grandparents who are also great appreciators.
Yes.
So my kids have probably inherited that DNA of liking. So where that has become a great bonding activity between me and my kids.
How does your playlist on your music streaming app look?
Well, so it's a mix of it's a very eclectic playlist, I would say. So it could be Beatles at some time, Led Zeppelin at some other time, and then Bhimsen Joshi and Rahman coming in later, and as new as Amit Trivedi or Pratik Kaur, who are like the latest disruptive players in the Indian industry, I would say. And so we have a big cupboard in my music room where we have photos of the Queen, Pink Floyd, Bhimsen Joshi, Rahman, and all of these. And my son is able to recognize all of them. So right now he's probably too young to understand how different they are as genres. But I think that's just the kind of personality I am, and I think the kind of music I enjoy.
So when you drive to work or when you drive to factory in the morning, what would play on your car stereo?
Well, so if I'm driving myself, it's a very different playlist. If I'm being driven around, it's a different playlist.
So what is it?
Well, so if I'm driven around, I usually like something which is a little more calmer side. So it could be jazz as well. Just today morning, I was listening to a compilation of about a 50-minute, which is of multiple jazz songs since the 60s. And, but very often I start with some classic rock or some metal, and that just collides with my drumming interest as well. So I try to make the most of it.
This has been a very, very meandering kind of a conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, as if it would be a stream which started somewhere, and given the terrain, we've just kind of traversed. But in this meandering, I was able to get in touch with probably 4 voices in Indranil, and correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I could hear the voice of a warrior who set up a very ambitious goal and target, and come what may, would like to achieve it.
Correct.
I also heard the voice of a mentor. Given your startup ecosystem that you're building within the Chitale group, I would like to believe that you are a mentor to many of those within the company. The third voice that I have heard in the last 30-35 minutes of conversation is of an artist, a creative artist. I mean, not necessarily a musician or a painter, but one who would like to build and shape newer realities. And yet, being a part of this 8-decade-old and highly reputed and respected Chitale group, there is this voice of a custodian also, which I could hear. You talked about preserving values, social values. So, how are these 4 voices within you? That of a warrior, that of a mentor, that of an artist, and let's say that of a custodian. I mean, do you sense those, and do you see they are doing something for you?
Indeed. And I would say that is where, that's something I realized later. But that's when I think I started working on myself beyond work.
Mm-hmm.
Because first few years of work, it was just a lot of physical hard work as well, a lot of proving to be done on your points, your debates, your challenges as well.
Proving to others or proving to yourself?
Proving to others and to yourself as well.
Okay.
But while doing that, what I also realized, and just as I said, about being in opposition and being in power, I was a great wartime general. But the thing is, you cannot keep being at war all the time. So, of course, the warrior in me or the fighter in me enjoys that fight. But if I end up picking up fights all the time, that's not going to be a sustainable way of building things. So that was a transition which I worked on myself, and I also had a mental coach who helped me guide through this, I would say. And That was quite interesting because that helped me expose myself to different facets of life. Because till then I was just working out heavy, driving fast motorcycles, or lifting weights, and doing a lot of work which was making statements, making points, but it was aggressive. And from that moment when I got into matrimony, then into more responsibilities which were beyond just the task specific activities.
You became a father.
I became a father, and I also started pondering that what kind of legacy do we set ahead of us, because till that point there was nothing ahead of me. I was just proving it to myself. But with the next generation coming into the picture and the idea of how do we set this up for the next generation, because I take it as a challenge that only 2% businesses which are family run survive into the fourth generation. So what survives into the fifth is 0.76 from what Harvard wants to say about it. So I want to be in that 0.76, but that will not happen just because I want to, but I need to create a foundation, and that needs to be beyond me as a person.
In business, especially businesses like yours, which is very large, very diversified, family business having such a large responsibility both within the country and globally. Power is something which is always at one's disposal.
Correct.
As a leader and as a person, as a human being, how do you look at the notion of power here? What it is doing to you and what it is doing for you?
I think power, or that idea of being in power or getting a little more power, is something that has also made me a little restrained. Compared
Can you say more?
In the sense that, so maybe I'll give you an analogy which I have noticed in my own self, that when I was in college, I used to drive a car which was a Maruti Swift. It was a small compact sedan. It had about 105 bhp, which I had reworked the engine onto and did about 150 bhp. And back then expressway did not have cameras, so we would go on the expressway just to drive fast, and we would be going faster than Mercedes-Benz or the Camrys and the fancy cars at that time. And the idea at that time was that we want to drive fast. Now I have a great German car, and it has 350 bhp, and I actually drive it slower than I would drive my Swift. And this transition is where I've realized that with that power you also have to be responsible about it, and that way it does not mean I drive slow, but doesn't mean I drive that aggressively. And that change is where I think that power has come into the picture on a personal front. But while doing that, what I've also seen, and that is where I think that's something I have to learn over the next couple of years better, is on the distribution of power. Because when you are sitting with certain amount of power or access, there are a lot of people who can benefit from this, and that is where the social ecosystem also has to progress. So you can be useful and powerful only as long as the ecosystem supports you to be so, and that's why you also have to democratize the access to power and help the ecosystem progress out of it.
This is where in my view, Indian family businesses stand very different.
Very true.
Given the notion of power.
Correct.
I mean, unlike a venture capital invested or large capital infused companies which are run by professional CEOs hired from B schools, wherever. How is the notion of power held by those who are in leadership position?
Correct.
And I think for time immemorial, this whole idea of power being equated to the notion of trusteeship.
Correct.
Or kartaship.
Correct.
That there is this interesting concept in the Indian knowledge system, very difficult to translate in English, I will try, is the concept of Varsa Hakka and Varsa Vruddhi, which basically means is what is it that I have inherited and what is it that I have added to that inheritance. Becomes a very, very important aspect that leaders have to work with.
Correct.
Where do you find yourself in this spectrum of what you have inherited and what are you adding to that inheritance. It would be great to end this conversation uh, on that note,
Wait,
as if the baton is being passed on through you
correct.
as a fourth generation person to maybe the fifth. So how do you look at this whole idea of what you have inherited versus your own dreams and aspirations of adding to that inheritance?
Well, so I think what I have inherited is very publicly known
Yes.
as a brand, and it's what I have inherited. The way I look at it is 75 years of hard work by 3 generations. Because everybody in their generations and their times did some right decisions, which is why we could get access to this mandate. So that is the inheritance. Of course, the values and the turnovers and the numbers and all other things are very, very materialistic, but that is what we have inherited. So obviously, when I look at it now, and I must say that in last 3 to 4 years and post pandemic, my horizon of looking at it has also changed. Where if I was looking at about 5 years, 4 years, 3 year benchmarking, now I am actually looking into that phase where what happens 10 years down the line and 15 years down the line. And that way, what we have to build is to ensure that this legacy and hard work is sustained and respected for what we do. And while doing that, the foundation of this builds into something bigger, where that is something that we can hand over to the next generation. Maybe not as operators of the business, but as inheritors of the business. But it needs to keep building that value across the ecosystem, just like by previous generations have done. And that is what I have to try and do and add to this inheritance.
Governance,
Yeah.
be it within business or at a societal level or a national level. I mean, the world has experimented with all kinds of models. There was monarchy
Yeah.
for thousands of years, and it created a lot of revolutions, be it the Bolshevik Revolution or the French Revolution, and that brought in the notions of either democracy or socialism. And the world for the last 150 years is experimenting with the idea of democracy, which is working with whatever flavors. It's a 10-headed hydra in that sense. But somehow, at least in India, what the model of governance that has worked really, really well is that of a benevolent monarch, Janta Raja, or Rayatecha Raja, as Shivaji Maharaj was called. And all I can wish and pray that you at such a young age have done such a wonderful thing in terms of not only ensuring that your 8-decade-old business, which is so well respected, not only stays relevant, but is reworked for current times and for future times.
Correct.
And yet being the custodian of some timeless values of the Rayatecha Raja, the power that is handed over to you by the people, that you are responsible for.
Absolutely.
I think I would love to see you and your work prosper and progress.
Thank you.
And love to see how you in your own ecosystem try and model the idea of being a Rayatecha Raja.
Correct.
The leader who has been anointed by people for people. So that's my wish and hope and pray for you, Indranil.
Thank you very much.
It has been such a wonderful, wonderful conversation to have you here. Thank you very much. Just as we end, love to know, what are you feeling? How has this conversation been for you?
Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed this, and I generally love reading about history, and that way Shivaji Maharaj is somebody that is somebody extremely inspirational, because as you said, he steered the country towards the idea that Hindu Rashtra can exist. And that way, in a time where we were being ruled by invaders, to a point where our identity can be ascertained, and that in a manner where the power can be exhibition in a manner which is publicly approved, is what he championed. So that's what we all should be learning all the time, because he built it from nothing.
So thank you very much,
Pleasure.
Indranil, for coming over, and
It's
wish you
really
good luck.
enjoyable.
Wish you good luck and take care.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you for your time today, my dear listeners. This is your host, Milind Agnihotri, signing off. Goodbye, take care, and stay safe. This podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be considered as a piece of any professional advice. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of its guest. Creators of this podcast expressly disclaim any and all liability or responsibility for any direct or indirect, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of this podcast. For feedback and suggestions, please write to wingsindia75@gmail.com. Thank you.